The Boy Who Lost His Face by Louis Sachar, 33. It seemed to David that all the faces on the wall were staring at him. The man with the scar, the woman with the double chin, the half-man, half-lion. He tried not to look at the face of the ordinary man with the wire-rimmed glasses, but his eyes kept being drawn to it. The man's face had a very slight smile. David didn't remember seeing that smile the last time. Felicia Bayfield rubbed her long, skinny hands together. "So, Mr. Ballinger," she said, "you want me to remove the curse, do you?" He anxiously waited. He felt Tori squeeze his hand, and he squeezed back. There was a couch, a love seat, and 2 large chairs in the living room, but he and his friends were all bunched together on the couch. Killer lay in Mo's lap. Mrs. Bayfield sat in the chair across from them. "Well?" she demanded. "Oh," said David, "I didn't know you wanted me to answer. I thought it was one of those questions, that you're not supposed to answer." "Rhetorical," whispered Tori. "Rhetorical," said David. Muttered Mrs. Bayfield. "He brought back the cane," said Tori. "You said he'd remove the curse if he brought back the cane." "Silence," ordered Mrs. Bayfield. "I don't like children trying to tell me what to do. In my day, children were taught to respect their elders." She rose from her chair. "Stand up, Tori," she commanded. Tori let go of David's hand and stood up. Mrs. Bayfield grabbed her elbow and said, "Come with me into the kitchen." David leaped to his feet. "She didn't do anything," he said, taking hold of Tori's other arm. "She was just—" Felicia Bayfield's cold stare silenced him. He sat back down on the couch and watched Mrs. Bayfield lead Tori through a door at the end of the room. "What do you think she's going to do to her?" whispered Ricky. "I wonder how she knew her name was Tori," asked Mo. "I hope she doesn't steal her face," said Larry. "What?" asked David. "I hope she doesn't steal her face," Larry repeated. "No, what were you saying, Mo?" David asked. "Tori never said her name," said Mo. "I wonder how she knew it." "That's just part of her powers," David explained. "She's been watching me for the last few weeks. She knows everything I do. She's seen me with Tori still." "What?" asked Mo. "She called her Tori, but she called me Mr. Ballinger." "So?" "I don't know," said David. He looked at the faces on the wall. The ordinary man was no longer smiling. The face hadn't really changed, but it just didn't seem to be smiling anymore. Maybe it never was. Larry gasped. He turned around to see Tori step back in the living room, holding a mask over her face. She was followed by Mrs. Bayfield. Each step Tori took was very slow and deliberate. Her hands rigidly held the mask in front of her. It was a mask of her own face. The shape of the nose, the mouth, everything was the same, every freckle. Mrs. Bayfield was holding a glass filled with a cloudy yellow liquid. "Stop," she commanded. Tori stopped and stood perfectly still, like a statue. Mrs. Bayfield stepped past her and held the glass to David. "Here." He hesitated a moment, then took the glass. "Drink it," she said. For just a second he considered throwing it in her face, but that was how he got into this mess in the first place. "If you want the curse to be removed," she said, "you better drink." "What about her?" he asked. "Only one thing can save her now," said Mrs. Bayfield. "What?" "First, you have to drink." He drank the liquid. It was sweet, but at the same time very sour. "Ah," said Mrs. Bayfield, as if she had been the one who drank it. "I feel a lot better. We are now both rid of the horrible curse." "You?" asked Mo. "The curse was just as painful for me as it was for Mr. Ballinger," she said. "Maybe even worse for me." "What about Tori?" asked David. He looked at her rigid like a statue, her face in front of her face. "Kiss her," said Mrs. Bayfield. Tori seemed to move just a little bit, then became perfectly still again. David got up from the couch and stood directly in front of her. He could feel his own heartbeat, and he could see Tori's body tremble just a little bit. She had a beautiful face, even if it wasn't attached to her head. He no longer believed any of this. Besides, he never believed in curses in the first place. He kissed the mask gently on the lips. He was surprised how hard and stiff it felt. "Oh!" Tori swooned behind the mask. She dropped to the floor in a faint. Her mask still covered her. "Okay," David said. "Now tell me what's going on." Tori removed the mask. She still had her face behind it. She blinked her eyes. "Where am I?" she asked. "You can stop pretending," said David. "I assure you, Mr. Ballinger," said Mrs. Bayfield, "no one—" "Why do you keep calling me Mr. Ballinger?" he asked. "That's your name. Except you call her Tori," he pointed out. "You two know each other." "You called me Mr. Ballinger because that's what she always used to call me." Mrs. Bayfield and Tori looked at each other, then they both laughed. What? You mean she's not a witch? Asked Larry. She's my aunt, said Tori, getting up. She hugged Felicia Bayfield, and they both laughed again. My great-aunt. David looked at the two of them together and wondered why he hadn't noticed it sooner. They looked very much alike. If nothing else, their green eyes should have given it away. He wondered if Mrs. Bayfield used to have red hair, too. He glanced at Ricky, who was still sitting petrified on the corner of the couch. We had you going, said Tori. You thought the drink was my face juice, didn't you? Oh, I knew it was lemonade all along, said David. Then why'd you kiss her? Asked Ricky. He felt himself blushed as he shrugged his shoulders. Tori also blushed. That caught me by surprise, too. I didn't know she was going to tell you to do that. Wait, said Mo. I don't get it. If you're just a normal person, how'd you put a curse on David? I never said I was a normal person, said Mrs. Bayfield. Tori laughed. But no, I did not put a curse on him, she continued. She turned to David. When you and your compatriots attacked me, one of them said something like, watch out, the witch might put a curse on you. So I made up a curse. I don't even remember what I said. Your doppelganger will regurgitate on your soul, said David. Mrs. Bayfield laughed. It's not very good, but I didn't have a lot of time to think of something better. She waved it off. I had completely forgotten about it until you suddenly appeared at my door, ranting and raving about curses and lemonade and your pants falling down. I had absolutely no idea who you were or what you were talking about. And then to my utter astonishment, I realized you were one of the boys who had attacked me, and that you really believed I put a curse on you. She held out her hands and smiled. But I certainly didn't know you were the famous Mr. Ballinger. She looked at Tori. Tori blushed again. But you did know my name, said David, and my phone number. I saw it written on a pad of paper. I wrote that, said Tori. I called you from here. You probably don't remember. I heard you answer the phone, and then I got scared and hung up. I just wanted to find out. I mean, you had been so nice to me, and then you suddenly just started ignoring me. I just wanted to find out why. I thought maybe it was something I said or did, or maybe Maureen was your girlfriend, and didn't want you talking to me. Me? Exclaimed Mo. Yeah, well, what about you and Randy? Asked David. That was... Okay, I sat next to him at the movies, but I didn't go there with him. It was just a coincidence. We shared a box of Milk Duds. She shrugged. Is that why you stopped talking to me? No, I was afraid of the curse, explained David. Larry had a plan to remove the curse. He glanced at Larry. We tried it, and then we had to wait 3 days to see if it worked. I was afraid to talk to you during those 3 days. I guess I acted kind of weird. But that night you called me, I was going to call you, except I didn't know your phone number. Oh, said Tori, disappointed he hadn't called. I wasn't home anyway. I was here. So when you poured lemonade on your head, exclaimed Ricky, that was Larry's plan? You got a better one? Asked Larry. Did you say David's pants fell down? Mo asked Mrs. Bayfield. He had the cutest purple shorts, exclaimed Tori. She and Mo laughed. You said you closed your eyes, said David. I lied. I assure you, David, said Mrs. Bayfield, if I'd known you'd come back with your face so badly bruised, I would never have asked you to bring me my cane. I'm very sorry about that. Me too, said Tori. I didn't know what to do when you said you had to fight Roger. I didn't know how to stop you, and then he just kept hitting you over and over. She shivered. David shrugged. He was glad he'd brought back the cane, even if there was no curse. He was glad he stood up to Roger, too. He had gotten his face back, so what if it was a little bruised? At least he could feel it was there. And that's the end of chapter 33.